15 minutes. I'll try and stick to that time as much as possible. But I think it's an interesting topic, this issue of personal branding, and its relevance in terms of the conference that you're holding and your theme of looking at success in handling the various challenges that we come across. So what we will do during this presentation is to look at some definitions of personal branding. We'll look at the world's top brands and what can we learn about branding from those world top brands, and what is the link then between the corporate brand personality and also personal branding. We'll also look at why is it important, why is personal branding important in the first place, and then also look at positioning attributes. What do people value, and just give some food for thought in terms of that, and then also just conclude with a few thoughts. So if you look at Wikipedia, I think you can get all sorts of definitions of personal branding, but I just picked the one from Wikipedia, which says personal branding is the practice of people marketing themselves and their careers as brands. While previous self-help management techniques were about self-improvement, the personal branding concept suggests that success comes from self-packaging. So we'll look at that and see whether we agree at the end of the day. So if we look at the world's top brands, I was looking at the top 3 world brands, and at number 3 this year, according to those who do brand barometers, they are looking at Google as the top brand number 3. Its brand value is approximately $121 billion. And Google looks at itself as a non-conventional company whose mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And they believe that a key issue about their brand is evolution, brand evolution. They continue to evolve. Their mission, they say, is to organize the world's information, as I've said, and make it accessible and useful. The key words that they say when they look at their brands as they acquit their duties is the issue of the fact that they believe they are succinct, they believe that they're an ambitious brand, and they also see the stage for an earnest and challenging mission, a mission that's enthusiastically championed by its 53,600 employees. And I think the key take home there on that page is really the issue that if you're looking at personal branding, it's not about yourself. Yes, it's about your personal success, but to what end? And that's where I liked what our guest of honor said, that at the end of the day, it shouldn't stop at self. It should be about the institution that you're working with, and it should also be about, country as well. Sorry, I'm getting a signal here. So I think that's a critical issue, that when we look at personal branding, let's not stop at self. It's about the institution, organizations that we're working for, and ultimately, those institutions, organizations also contribute to national development and national goals. Then if we look at the second brand in terms of world rankings, it's Apple. Apple has a brand value of $146.3 billion. And Apple's branding strategy is that it focuses on emotions. So when Apple thinks about itself as a brand, it's looking at emotional connection with the people who interact with that brand. So emotions are important to them. They're also very big on imagination. They want to be perceived as a brand that's oozing with imagination. They also want to be thought of as an innovative brand, a passionate brand, a brand that conveys hope, and also a brand that's about aspiration and power. So it also looks at the fact that those issues should be transferable from that brand to the people who interact also with the brand in terms of their technology. The number 1 brand at the moment is Amazon. And Amazon, when it looks at its own proposition, first of all, let's look at its brand value. It has a brand value of 150.8 billion. And this is up significantly from the previous year. It's actually up 47%. Amazon is the largest online business by market capitalization and revenue. And beyond being an online retailer, it also produces cloud infrastructure and electronics, and it's also present in music, and most recently, it's also acquired food business. So it's moved from a situation where it's an entirely digital brand to a brand that is also in the physical realm in terms of food. So Amazon is one of the world's most trusted brands, and it is very sincere, so it wants to be thought of as a sincere brand, and it's supported by industry, changing shipping and return policies. Those are important for it, and it also wants to be known as exceptional. So that is its differentiation. When it compares itself to similar brands doing similar work, it wants to be perceived as exceptional. There's a book that was written by an author who talks about branding quite a lot and personal branding as well, called Leslie Everett. And I just wanted to share some comments that people have made about that book because I think it's relevant to what we're talking about today. John Lewis, as you might know, is a retailer operating mainly in Europe. And the CEO of John Lewis, when he read that book, he said, "At John Lewis, we believe our success and reputation is based on the trust our customers have in us to do the right thing and also to do things right. And in that sense, trust becomes almost entirely from the customer's positive experience with our staff." So again, it comes to that issue that we were talking about, that people experience our corporate brands, even our country, depending on how we interact with them, how we behave. If we look at the experience that our guest speaker had, where he was, being talked about as a Zambian, was that a relevant issue? Was that a relevant conversation for someone who's coming into the country? So it's really about how we behave and interact with people and the experiences that they have with us, which are important. So in terms of John Lewis, they say that the issue of trust is big for them. Then if we look at other comments on that book, somebody else from ASDA is a retailer again. They said that I recommend this book to business leaders because as ASDA, our relationship with Leslie keep us focused on the culture of our business, and that's what drives our bottom line. So at ASDA, as far as they're concerned in terms of their business philosophy and strategy, the issue of business culture comes in big, and they believe that it impacts their bottom line. When you look at issues of culture, who is driving that culture? Who is communicating that culture? It's their employees. So it's about us again and how we operate within our businesses and the kind of interface that we have with customers. And then finally, just looking at comments from that book, we have the Vice President of Oral Corporation, who was again commenting and said, what people say about you as a leader and your company when you're not there to defend can significantly positively or negatively affect business growth. The impact of a polished brand of a person and their behavior cannot be underestimated. So again, we look at the issue of the importance of our personal branding and how it impacts the overall corporate brand or institutional brand that we work for. And ultimately, I think especially as a country when we're trying to all work together in terms of economic revival, it also impacts on that as well. I'll talk a little bit more about issues of polish. I'll also talk a little bit more about those issues that we were saying we need to just look at how we impact those bigger brands than us. So we also have an author called Jacob Morgan. Jacob Morgan is a well-respected author on issues of branding as a whole, not just personal branding. And Jacob Morgan, when he was talking about the importance of personal branding, he said, in a world where the only job security that exists is the one that you can create for yourself. And I think let's pause for a moment there, because we are in a shrinking job market, not just here in Zimbabwe, but internationally. Jobs are difficult to come about. And when you look at issues of job security, it's about us creating a brand that lends us well into issues of job security. So he says, it's never been more important to build a personal brand. And I'm not just saying you need to be famous, but it's not acceptable to be invisible either. So a strong personal brand is an important way to future-proof your career. So it's not looking at today, it's looking about the future, by ensuring that people will want to work with you or to promote you. So it's about our interactions, not only with customers, but it's also important in terms of how we are perceived by peers and how we are perceived about our own superiors. So it's not just about survival and success, but it's also about meaningful contribution to value creation. And our guest of honor did talk about that issue, that nowadays we need to think about where is the value being created, how is that value being created, and what role am I as an individual playing in terms of that value creation. So we just move on to the next slide. We talk about why personal branding, and on that slide it talks a little bit about some of the things that I've already talked about where the gurus were talking about why personal branding. But I just want to pick on a couple of issues of research that have been done, which are reflected on that slide, which talk about leadership. And I think sitting among us here, if I ask how many people are in positions of leadership, I think a lot of you will put up your hand. But I think the information on this slide that has been done by reputable researchers brings home to us just the onus of responsibility that we carry as leaders and why we need to think seriously about personal branding. The research they did showed that 45% of a company's reputation is attributed to the CEO's reputation. I'm going to pause there and ask you to contextualize it in your own situations. They also say that 77% said the CEO's reputation attracts employees to companies. People want to work for a good leader, and we should think about that. Then they also said 70% impacts on retention. So it's not just about attracting the best skills, but it's about retaining them. And as leaders, we play an important role in terms of whether we retain those best skills. So I think it's really food for thought in terms of when you're branding yourself, you're working on your personal brand, it is an issue that has a wider impact than your own quest for success. So when we are branding, while there are a lot of things there on the screen that you can have a look at, you're also looking at the importance of being a recognizable brand. You're also looking at being a preferred brand. You're also looking at positioning of that brand. And I also want us to think that when we talk about personal branding, again, let's not just shrink it to the individual, but for instance, for your institution. So the kind of things that we're talking about here also have a bearing on institutions as well. So let's now look at the process of personal branding. What are the pillars of a strong brand? And I would put it to you that there are several ways to develop a brand, but I've just chosen this particular model, which looks at 3 pillars. And the 3 pillars are building a basic brand, building credibility and an audience, and also targeting opportunities. So if we look at the first pillar, we're looking at issues of value, what you stand for, what you look like, your skills, your unique selling points, and your differentiation, because differentiation is important when you're looking at branding. Then your second pillar is really, in essence, looking at how do you build credibility around your brand. And then the third issue is targeting opportunities. How do you create those opportunities? How do you target them? So when you're figuring out your brand and you're, drawing up your brand, it's important for you to ask certain questions. And some of the questions that you can look at is, who are you? When you look at yourself, who are you? What are your unique qualities? What are your talents? What are your areas of expertise? What is your vision for your personal brand? What is the vision for the corporate brand that you work for? And ultimately, when you look at your own contribution to national aspirations, how do you fit in there? What are your goals in developing your brand? Is it about changing a job? Is it about finding clients? Is it about influence? Is it about networking? What is it that you're looking to do in terms of building that brand? Because that must be clear. And then you must also be clear of who is it that you're trying to influence or interact with? Who is your audience? That also needs to be very clear. Then, as you know, when you're looking at overcoming challenges, when you are seeking success in terms of achieving your goals and objectives, sometimes we need promoters, we need mentors. And I think often we lose opportunities for mentorship. And what I have found in life is that if you approach a mentor, they're usually more than willing and ready to be your mentor. So sometimes what happens is we lack the confidence to approach those people, but I do encourage you that we sometimes cannot get to where we want to get in terms of our own personal goals or even organizational goals until we work through people and with the help of people. So think about it. Issues of mentorship are important. Also, other things that you need to ask yourself when you're building that personal brand is, what are you known for? When people look at you, what is it that they take away? What is the takeaway? Is it your reliability? Is it issues of integrity? Are you trustworthy? Is it about you being ethical? Or on the negative side, when people see you, do they say, "Doma tsotsaya," which we don't really want, obviously. So the important thing is also to understand perceptions about you and what strengths you hold. Now, when we look at ourselves, we have a personal image of who we are and what we believe our strengths are. But if you're serious about building that personal brand, it's also important for you to ask questions. Ask people, and don't ask the kind of people whom you know are going to give you a friendly and nice answer. Ask the people who you know are critical, because those are the people who are going to give you honest answers. And only when you have that honest reflection of yourself and you have an honest opinion in terms of what your weaknesses, your strengths are, can you use that information to then build a brand. The other thing that we look at is the gathering evidence also. As you go about your career, you're going to have instances where people come to you and reinforce positive things that you've done. Keep a record of that, because when you're writing your resumes and so on, in terms of getting your brand out there, that's some of the important information that you can also use to strengthen your brand. Then monitor the brands you admire and learn from them. So here we're talking about brands in terms of other people, brands in terms of other organizations who might be doing the same or similar work to your institution. What is it that they're doing better than you? And learn from them. Then, when we look at building credibility and an audience, I think the difference between personal branding when it started and personal branding now is you have so many tools open to you in terms of what companies like Google can offer you and other social media platforms. So if I ask you to Google anybody in this room right now, you will find information about them. What I don't know is when you Google an individual and you then go to that individual and say, based on what I Googled and found out about you on the internet, this is the picture that I have of who you are. And I'm not sure whether the person whom you've approached in that regard will also agree with you or will say, that is the picture that I want to have of myself out there. So I think it's important for us, the take home here is to know that what's happening now in life is that the content that we put out about ourselves, be it on Facebook, be it in conferences such as this. Somebody may be on Twitter right now talking about what's happening at this conference, talking about your interface in this conference. All of that builds towards your personal brand. So we are now living in a world where our privacy is being interrogated, where life is not as private as it used to be. And I really challenge you today, Google yourself and Google maybe one or two other people in this room and just find out the amount of information that is out there about each and every one of us. But when we are talking about self-branding, we then need to be conscious of that and ensure that whatever is going out on every single platform on which we put information about ourselves, that it is towards creating the brand that we want. Then, in terms of that credibility, just make sure that what you send out is accurate, so that if ever you're taken to task about anything which is out there on you, you are able to defend it. And it's important also that it is consistent and that it appeals to your audience. I'm going to talk a little bit about consistency and borrow from what Madam President said this morning, and also from something that is highly topical in the media at the moment. Two personal brands. The first one is Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods built up a very solid personal brand over many, many years. He was admired as a golfer. He was admired as a sportsman, and so on. The name Tiger Woods, other people with other brands, watches, and all sorts of things wanted to be associated with that brand, which was Tiger Woods. Then the wheels fell off. And the wheels fell off because of his personal, private behavior, which, because of the world that we live in, wasn't so personal and private anymore. I mean, until today, the mind just boggles, and maybe the gentlemen here, you can relate to Tiger better than me, some of you. I don't understand how a man can have 12 girlfriends all at the same time. And I just don't. I don't get it. So I just, for me, I live a very simple, I live a very simple life, So when I try and think, could I join it and say, I have no idea, and where he got the time from, and how blind he was his wife that she didn't even realize until the wheels started coming off. But that's the thing, that it destroyed Tiger's career. Within 2 days, Tiger, the watchmaker, pulled out their contract. Nike didn't want to touch him. All these big brands that had been running to him, they wanted nothing to do with Tiger Woods. And he was destroyed. He ended up realizing that for him to pick up that brand and give it the value that he had created over time, he needed to take a step back. First of all, he needed to apologize. That's the one thing I liked about Tiger Woods, that he didn't try and beat about the bush. He came out and said, you know what, I'm sorry, I've messed up. I've lost my wife, I've destroyed my family, I've destroyed trust that people had in me. But he took a back seat, and God also intervened. He ended up with all sorts of medical issues. But that time out helped us to forget a little bit about his transgressions. And he's come back again, a very strong, clean image. And those of you who are golfers or who are interested in golf, if you look at the recent tournament that he's been involved in, he played magnificently. But that wasn't the issue. The issue for anyone who is interested in branding was the number of people who watched that tournament, the number of people who came physically to watch him and follow him hole by hole by hole. It's never been seen, never. It was a total phenomenon last week. And that means Brand Tiger is back. And the challenge for Brand Tiger will be to stick to one woman. And the challenge for Brand Tiger will also be, to keep that image clean so that we keep respecting him, and that those brands who want to link up with him are happy and comfortable to be able to link up with him. And again, I come back to this issue that our guest of honor talked about, that you must always think beyond yourself, because Tiger also has a responsibility beyond Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods is a role model. He's a role model for black children to know that they can get to wherever they want if they put their minds to it. He's a role model to young people to just know that if you have a goal, you go for it, you can actually make it. And we're hoping that brand Tiger Woods has learned a lesson. Then the other example that I wanted to give about the issue of consistency of messaging, consistency of how you communicate that brand, is Bill Cosby. I mean, I don't know, how many of you know Bill Cosby, but people my age will know that Bill Cosby was a brand that we admired. The guy was funny. I mean, you watch Bill Cosby, you'd cry with laughter. He was a fantastic comedian, and he was a fantastic black comedian, and he was totally respected by all sorts of people. But the issue is, brand Bill Cosby was about family. He was a man who went out there, promoted family. He used to interact a lot with young children. He spent a lot of time doing all sorts of charitable issues with young children. He was a trusted brand. And yet when you look at his real life and what he was up to, it's like chalk and cheese. I mean, for me, when the guy started being accused by all sorts of women about, issues which are not far from Tiger Woods, but which are even worse, because he was raping people, I was totally, upset about that. That this was a brand that we trusted, but it was not what he was, and the brand that he was painting was not the same. So it's important for us to take lessons from disasters like that, to say, let's be people of integrity. And I think the occupation, the profession that you're in is a profession that actually requires integrity. Honesty and integrity. And if you can get a brand that is based on those values of honesty and integrity, then you are on the right path. And that issue of consistency as well. So I've talked about the fact that you need to define your audience and so on. And we've also talked about having to figure out what our brand is, and bringing credibility and so on. The other thing is, think about it as a personal brand for the benefit, again, of yourself, your institution, your organizations that you work for. And if you're entrepreneurs, the organization that you've built up, be a thought leader. Be known as a thought leader. Give it some thought in terms of what are the things that you hold dear? What are the ideas that you have that can enhance the profession, that can enhance your corporate brand, that can contribute to nation building, that can contribute to the building of our economy? And don't be shy about it. Develop your thought leadership and share it for the benefit of mankind. The issue of targeting opportunities, we are saying once you have started working on that brand, once you have worked on what are the issues for which you can provide thought leadership, then find outlets for them. Find ways to ensure that you are heard. So seek spaces, opportunities to appear on various forums, because sometimes what happens is, yes, you are invited as a speaker, but there's nothing that stops you from volunteering to be a speaker. So find those organizations, those annual conferences, those spaces where you can volunteer to let people have an insight into your thoughts and contribute to the development of mankind that way. So you can also, when you are looking at building your brand, particularly using social media and so on, what you can also do is find out who are other influencers and thought leaders whose thoughts are incongruent with your own. And you can also ask, especially those who have got established websites, established spaces in social media, you can also ask them to be able to contribute on those platforms. Because the advantage you have there is they probably have a larger audience than you have at present. So that's one way of ensuring that you're heard, by climbing onto other spaces and other platforms of existing thought leaders. And I'm sure that provided that there's congruence in your ideas, a lot of them won't mind. And we talk about that as strategic content placement. The other thing is just be confident to seize opportunities on various platforms, whether it's in the workplace or in professional spaces. Be confident about networking. I know that, when you are in a situation, for instance, you are in a conference like that, like this one, not everybody has got that confidence to engage with people they don't know. But I would encourage you to do that because we learn from each other. And then also the issue of developing sharp and interesting resumes. When you're asked to put a resume together, gone are the days where you list your degrees, your diplomas, where you went to school, where you went to high school, primary, ECD, and so on. People want to know who are you? Who are you and what do you have to offer? And that is what you should put on your resumes. So look at that and see what is interesting, what is different about you. Like I was telling you, what's different about me is I led an Olympic team. That's very different, even though I may be saying it myself, but it is different. And usually people are interested and it becomes a point of conversation and so on. So look at issues of consistency. We've given the example of Tiger Woods. We've given the example of Bill Cosby, that it's important to be consistent. And the issue also about consistency is it's got something to do with integrity. If you start telling lies, those lies are going to get onto the social media platforms. And when people Google, they'll Google and find out about you. And that's when you have these horrible phenomenons of people then going on social media and so on and saying, you know what, this person is claiming they are this, but they are not actually that. And that will be detrimental, obviously, to the brand that you're trying to build up. The issues of etiquette, ladies and gentlemen, is also important. We can turn around and say, I am African, and the way in which I do things is African. I am very proud to be African, and I do things in an African way. But I also know that we live in a global village, and there are certain issues of etiquette that are expected of us when we're in that global village, when we're interacting internationally and so on. We've said Zimbabwe is open for business. And if indeed investors start coming in and our own space becomes more cosmopolitan, we need also to understand other cultures and issues of etiquette as well come in. So we need to take time as we're building our brand to also look at issues of etiquette. Don't send conflicting signals, because this affects trust and credibility. So if you say you are known for certain values, you must always exhibit those certain values. And remember, I keep saying that we're talking about personal branding at a personal issue, but even beyond that, whether it's this institution or the organizations that we work for or that we create, that issue of not sending conflicting signals is totally important. I did an exercise last year where I went to my own work colleagues and I said to them, I just want you to tell me that when you are working in teams, because often when we are in our workspaces, we're working in teams, I asked them to do an exercise to say, what are the important attributes that you want in a team member, that you believe drives success, that you believe contributes to surmounting challenges and business corporate success? What are the attributes that you want in those people? And it's an exercise that I think if you are serious as well about personal branding at a personal level and also understanding the thoughts and what values your peers have, it's also an exercise that I would encourage you to carry out. It's research at the end of the day. So the issues that they pointed out to me was that when they're working in work teams and with fellow colleagues, the things they put value in are issues of reliability, dependability, issues of commitment, people who are creative, who are innovative in their thought process, people with high quality work ethics, people who are able to meet deadlines, people who are highly skilled that they can depend on, that if there is an assignment to be done, they can pick out an individual to say, in this assignment, I will work with so-and-so in my workspace because they're totally skilled to carry out that task. Then they said a very important thing for them was the attitude, people's attitudes. They put a lot of emphasis on that. Then they also put emphasis on people who care. That often in workspaces, sometimes, well, I don't want to say often, but sometimes we work in workspaces where there's a lack of care. And they were really saying that you need to get to a space where you work with people who care about you, who care about the outcomes at work, who care about whether organizations succeed or not, who care about whether Zimbabwe works or not. So they felt that that was an important aspect. And then the issue of respect as well. And I think it comes back to our culture as Africans, that generally we are respectful people. So from that point of view, they also felt that respect was a key attribute. But I also asked them to rank and say what did they feel were the 4 most important attributes. And I'm not sure what your thoughts are, but I will share with you what they felt were their most important attributes. They felt that issues of reliability and dependability was one of the top 4. Issues of innovation and creativity, people who are innovative in their thought process, they felt that that was an important attribute. They also felt that people who have the ability to meet deadlines. Because if we're saying Zimbabwe is open for business and we don't respect deadlines, there's a big problem. So they felt that that issue of being able to meet deadlines was a very important thing. And then they also felt that the issue of attitude, because attitude affects everything that we do. And if you don't have that positive attitude that rubs on to other people, that can be problematic as well. I'm not really sure whether when you heard all those attributes, those are the 4 you'd have chosen. I would be interested to know someone who has a different thought in terms of the importance of attributes or the most important attributes, or do you agree? Does anyone have a different thought on it? Okay, so those were really the issues of the various attributes that they looked at. But this was just something that I did, amongst my own work colleagues. Certainly, I would encourage that if you are looking at issues of branding, whether it's your corporate brand, your institutional brand, or your personal brand, those are some of the questions that you need to ask people so that you see whether you possess those or not, and see, how you can build on that. So, ladies and gentlemen, in coming to a conclusion, just to remind that everything you say and do influences the way people perceive your brand. As you set out to create a new brand or take an established brand into the future, the duty is to create a seamless experience that expresses the heart of your brand at every touch point. That lack of congruency is problematic. Everything from the biggest idea to the smallest detail fits together to create a complete picture of your brand, to inspire, to connect with your audience, no matter how well you know your industry or area of expertise. It is wise to remember that things are changing, and they're changing at a very fast rate. I want to pick again on what our guest of honor said. I was watching a Will Smith movie once, maybe 8 years ago, and he was taking his SIM card out of his phone and throwing it in the bin and so on, and I was thinking, this is a bit far-fetched, why would you need to do that? But he was doing it because he didn't want to be tracked in that movie. And it's real, isn't it? That's what's happening today. People can track us, they can know where we are just simply by finding out where our cell phone is. So things are really changing fast. And it would be wise to remember that because they're changing at a rate that's faster than ever before, we need to stay up to date. We need to continuously develop ourselves and continuously ensure that we are able to add value because we are up to speed in terms of what's happening within our own profession and the life around us. It takes time to build a personal brand, and you need to stay relevant. You can talk to people like Kodak, the example we heard earlier. You can talk to people like Nokia. I mean, all of us, when we began owning a cell phone, if I ask to say, please put up your hands, most of you will put up your hands to say this first handset you had was Nokia. But if I ask now, well, let's do that actually. Can someone put up their hand, anyone who currently uses a Nokia? But Nokia was the brand, wasn't it? When cell phones came in, that was the brand. But they got left behind because they didn't develop as fast and understand the customer as fast as their competitors. And now you find that people like Samsung, people like Apple and so on are the leaders because they kept in track with what Nokia got left behind. We don't want to get left behind as well. Learn new things, develop new skills, and expand your knowledge. If you're not growing, then you're stagnating, and nobody wants to be a stagnant brand. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Very much. I was actually on Dr. Google taking the advice from Busi Chindove, not Busi Chindove, and would like to, at this moment, to really thank her for a powerful, well thought of presentation. Thank you, Mrs. Chindove. Thank you very much for that presentation. She talked about issues to do with polish. Ladies and gentlemen, as we are going for lunch, some of these things are free. Go on Dr. Google, go on Wikipedia. Let's know our cutlery. Let's know which fork to use, which knife to use, which is a steak fork, which is a fish fork, sorry, a steak knife, a fish fork, which is a soup spoon, which is a dessert spoon. It's not a spoon just to use because there's a spoon on the table. So she also spoke about issues of branding for ICSAZ as an institute, council members here present, past presidents here present, members of the various committees. Let's think about our institute. She spoke about issues for Zimbabwe, issues for Africa. We are a battered brand. Perceptions do count. How do people perceive brand ICSAZ? She spoke about Nokia. She spoke about Kodak. ICSAZ was the institute to belong to. I trust it still is the institute to belong to. Brand perceptions do count. What are you known for? What was Tiger Woods known for? She spoke about consistency. I Googled and I decided to Google Vixen Ngube. And if you Google right now, you will find he's a very consistent person. He's wearing a gray suit. He's wearing a white polka dot shirt. And he's wearing a red tie. Very consistent. Talk about brand consistency. I also Googled Busi Chindove. And what did I see on the internet? Busi says you need to know what people know about you, what information is going out about you. And what did I see? She's there talking about Olympics, being the vice president and so forth. So what am I going to do on Monday? I'm going to speak to the Honorable Kirsty Coventry to say, invite her for a cup of coffee, learn a few notes about your job. So there you are, she's a woman on the move. Another hand of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Can I ask her to answer a couple of questions if we are ready? Any questions for Madame Chindove?
I think while people are, sorry ma'am, I think while people are thinking whether they want to ask any questions or not, I want to talk a little bit about a personal experience about this issue of etiquette and so on. You know, sometimes it's a scary thing. You are coming from Africa, you are interacting with people from another culture and so on, you're not sure what to do. But I just want to tell you the story that happened to me so that you can also have confidence, because mistakes happen and you must feel comfortable making mistakes. It's a learning opportunity. So there I was. I used to be a broadcaster. That's one thing that I didn't put on the resume. But I went on attachment with BBC. They've got 4 radio stations, BBC Radio 1, Radio 2, Radio 3, Radio 4. So I went for lunch. I was invited for lunch by the head of BBC Radio 1, and he took me to Stonehenge. If you know, Stonehenge is a historic place for them. It's almost like a Great Zimbabwe kind of thing. So we went for lunch at Stonehenge, at what was obviously a very fancy restaurant. Now here I am in Ndakazvarwa, Kwaifirit, and I spent most of my early childhood in Mondoro, right? And then you're putting me in this fancy restaurant in Stonehenge. So what do? I sit there and I said, keep it simple, right? If you keep it simple, surely you can't mess up. So the meal went well. I ordered, chicken. That's safe enough. Then what happened now is the dessert came. And I looked at all these fancy things written in French, I was clueless what those things were. So I said, I'm not going to experiment. Kumshakwedu, we have fruit salad. Fruit salad has got to be the most basic dessert that you can even think of. So I said, I'll have a fruit salad, thank you. So the fruit salad comes. I sweated. I think my temperature went up about 6 degrees and my eyes went so big because when the fruit salad came, it had little slices of this, little slices of this, little dots of this all over the place. Now, then I think, okay, of all this cutlery, which one am I supposed to use? So I said, I'm not even going to make a move until the next person does so that I see. So they do that. And I do the same. Then I started eating. Then I noticed that there was a woman who was sitting at a table next to us, and she was laughing. She was laughing, tears were streaming down her face, and she kept on looking at me and she was laughing. And then I looked at the people I was sitting with, and I could see that they were very uncomfortable. British people will never tell you that they're uncomfortable. If you don't read it off their face and their behavior, you won't know. But I looked at them and I could tell body language that, something is wrong here. So, being me, I just said to them, guys, I'm obviously doing something wrong here. For everybody's comfort, you'd better tell me what I'm doing wrong. Otherwise, everyone's going to be miserable this meal. So my host said, okay, do you know that fruit there that you're eating? And I said, yes. And he said, you're not supposed to eat it with its skin. It's just for decoration. Oh, my. So there you are. But the moral of the story is, guys, this is not how we were brought up. This is not our culture. If you're in a space where you're not sure, ask. And what happened is everybody laughed. The woman who was at the table next to us, I said it loud enough for her to hear. She blushed because she was now embarrassed. And my guest felt a lot more comfortable because now I had stopped doing the awkward thing of eating the unpeeled fruit.
Okay, any questions? Do we have any questions? Any questions? If there are no questions,